Well, good morning to you guys. It's almost nighttime for us here. I'm calling from Kabul in Afghanistan, and what's been a 4.5 day, I guess, pretty extensive visit to the region. I'll walk you through that. I'll have some comments in Spanish as well, and then we'll take some questions. But let me begin by saying tonight tonight our time, we're in Afghanistan after having visited Pakistan earlier in the week. Our goal was to kind of gain a general orientation to our overall efforts in the Afghanistan-Pakistan theater and to hear from the commanders and other officials who are here on the ground. So let me walk you through some of those meetings. In Pakistan, we met with General Kiani, who's the Foreign Secretary Bashir, and with senior parliamentarians, senior members of their parliament, and as well as our embassy and military officials. And then in Afghanistan, we've met with the U.S. Commander General Petraeus. We had dinner last night with President Karzai, and today we visited Camp Leatherneck and toured Nawa in the south of the country. And one thing that's clear from these visits is that 2011 is going to be a critical year for Afghan security forces to step up and play a bigger role. And we are heartened by some of the early success that we've seen as part of this surge strategy. In Afghanistan, I came away very impressed, first obviously by how fortunate we are to have men and women of the caliber that we have in uniform. They're making tremendous sacrifices to defend our freedoms back home, and their heroism is on display every day here in Afghanistan. I had the honor, of course, of meeting with several today for lunch from the state of Florida, and how proud we are to have sent our sons and daughters here and the tremendous job they're doing, and we'll have more about that when I return. But I can tell you that it is clear from everyone we've spoken to that the momentum of the Taliban in the south has clearly been reversed. And while our military has performed the way we knew that they would, with the valor and professionalism they've always shown, the true test will be whether with this partnership that we have with the Afghan government can bring their security forces up to speed. And we need to be able to hand off security responsibilities to the Afghans, and the 2014 goal that was established in Lisbon is preferable to any kind of artificial timeline for withdrawal. In fact, I would suggest that the benchmarks we need to look at are not necessarily troop withdrawal numbers, but rather successes at being able to turn entire regions over to functional governing bodies, court systems, governments, municipal governments. And we were able to see some of that today, and Nawa and came away very impressed. There's a lot of work left to do, but a lot has already been done, and it's important that we point that out. So as I said, 2011 is going to be a very crucial year for our efforts here in Afghanistan as part of this transition. Now let me talk briefly about Pakistan, because they are facing some very serious and multiple challenges, both from extremists within their tribal areas and also taking on some really important and necessary economic reforms. And so what we attempted to do when we were here in Islamabad, as well as in Kabul, is that our commitment to our partners here into this region is going to be enduring. If there's one thing we heard clear everywhere we went, is that people want to make sure that we are in this to win this, that we are in this for the long haul. And it's critically important that that message get across. And we tried to communicate that on behalf of our constituents, that the American people are not going to tolerate sanctuaries for al-Qaeda or the return of the Taliban to power. And let me just close up by telling you how appreciative I am of all the information and the cooperation that we've gotten, both regarding policies and strategies. We appreciate the efforts of Ambassador Munter, of General Petraeus, of the whole ISIS team. It made our visit here very informative and very, very comprehensive. En español, unas palabras, hemos pasado 5 días en la área de Afganistán y Pakistán. Empezamos con nuestra visita en Pakistán, donde pudimos reunirnos con el general Kiani y también con el secretario de Asuntos del Extranjero, Bashir, y también con miembros del Parlamento de ese país. Y en Afganistán hemos pasado 2 días aquí, incluyendo una visita con el general Petraeus, que es el comandante de las fuerzas de los Estados Unidos. También anoche cenamos con el presidente Karzai. Hoy visitamos con soldados de la Marina en un lugar llamado Camp Leatherneck, y también pudimos hacer un tour, nos pudimos revisar e ir a visitar un sector en el sur del país, una ciudad llamada Nawa. Lo que es claro que el año 2011 va a ser un año crítico para lo que son las fuerzas de seguridad y las fuerzas armadas de Afganistán. Es tiempo de que ellos empiecen a tomar un papel más mayor sobre la seguridad y futuro de su propio país, y le puedo reportar que lo que hemos visto aquí es progreso real y verdadero, y hay que felicitar y reconocer y honrar los sacrificios que han hecho las tropas americanas, nuestros soldados, los hombres y mujeres que nos están sirviendo aquí en este país. Pakistán es un país que tiene problemas muy serios, tiene la amenaza de extremistas islámico en las áreas rurales y montañosas en la frontera con Afganistán, y también tienen unas reformas económicas muy importantes y muy necesarias, una crisis económica que se ha ido creciendo durante los últimos meses. Pero lo que nosotros queremos dejar muy claro es que este país está comprometido a ver a esta misión cumplida. Si hay una cosa que hemos oído varias veces, bueno, hemos oído en todos los lugares donde hemos ido, es que quieren saber que los Estados Unidos van a terminar este trabajo, que no vamos a abandonar este teatro, que no vamos a abandonar esta misión hasta que la misión ha sido cumplida. Y la misión para mí es muy simple: poder entregarle, poder ayudar al pueblo de Afganistán, crear aquí un país próspero y pacífico, donde ellos puedan criar sus hijos con las mismas oportunidades y esperanzas que tienen niños y niñas en todas partes del mundo. Quiero terminar también por darle las gracias al embajador Moncho, al general Patreos y a todas las personas aquí en el equipo militar que nos han abierto las puertas y han hecho esta visita, una visita bastante exitosa. With that, we're going to answer questions. And what I'll try to do is, if I get any questions in Spanish, I'll answer them in English as well.
All right, thank you, Senator. We have time for a few questions. When you're called on, please unmute your phone and ask your question. The first question will be to the Associated Press.
Senator, who else joined you as far as members of Congress on this trip?
Well, Leader McConnell's here with us, as well as Senator Burr of North Carolina. Senator Graham of South Carolina was with us for a period of he actually is on reserve duty as well. So starting today, he was on reserve duty for a week. Senator Ayoff from New Hampshire, Senator Johnson from Wisconsin, and Senator Toomey from Pennsylvania.
All right, thank you. The next question we will take from the St. Petersburg Times. St. Petersburg Times has a question. Please unmute and go ahead.
Senator, it's Alex Lear. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to ask you, you had, according to a report I read on a NATO website, you had seen the Afghan army go through some military drills, essentially. Did you get any confidence at all that they are ready for the job ahead, that they're prepared?
Well, they're making strides in that direction. They are certainly a world away from where they were not so long ago. One of the things that, and to be clear, the training area, they're being trained by coalition forces. It's a combination of British, American, Jordanian troops who are there, and they're training them in all sorts of things. But there's real challenges. I mean, some of these, for example, some of the men serving in the armed forces have never driven a vehicle before. Then the first time they've ever driven a car or any kind of vehicle is a Humvee, that's a mine-clearing vehicle. So there are real challenges there. What we learned is that for a significant period of time there was no serious training effort, and that took time to ramp up. But everyone on the ground is really enthusiastic about the progress that's being made. We saw it firsthand today in their police force in Nawa. We walked into the marketplace there in open air through the streets. And look, they've got a long ways to go economically and socially and the progress they have to make, but there were well-trained police officers on the ground working in cooperation. So I think that there is a long ways to go. I mean, there's no way to overestimate how serious the challenge is, but we are headed in the right direction, and I think that General Petraeus and his team here have done a phenomenal job of really making progress in that regard.
The next question to the Miami Herald. Leslie Clark from the Miami Herald. Please unmute your phone. Have a question?
Yeah, could you elaborate on what you said about withdrawal being not, what benchmarks you would suggest for withdrawal?
Well, ultimately that's the goal. The goal is obviously for this country to be, that you have Afghanistan a functioning state, and that's clearly the goal. But and the question is, in my mind, I think the benchmarks we need to be focusing on are not necessarily the number of troops that are returning, but more so the areas that are slowly but surely turning over to Afghan authorities. I think that's what I would look at, is what are the territories, the different regions that are slowly beginning to be turned over to functional elements of the state, places where court systems are being set up, where municipal governments are being set up, municipal services are being set up, and that process is ongoing. It is happening. And you've already started to see some of those transitions happening. I think you'll have more good news on that front this year. And those are the kind of benchmarks that I would be focused on, because ultimately that is our goal here. Our goal is to leave a functional state, or help the Afghan people create for themselves a functional state. And what I'm reporting back is that based on everything we've seen here, we are making significant progress. It's difficult to overestimate. You cannot overestimate what a tough challenge it is. There are a lot of moving pieces, and we're going to talk a lot more about that in the days to come. But in our mind, what's pretty clear here is that the thing I would be focusing on right now is how many areas are we successfully transitioning over to Afghan control and the elements of a functioning Afghan government. And I think there's real significant progress being made on that front. We saw it today with our own eyes in Nawa.
One last question, please, from the Orlando Sentinel, Mark Matthews. Please go ahead, Mark Matthews.
Hey, I'm here. Thank you very much. Senator, to build off what Leslie was just talking about, at some point you have to imagine that there needs to be a point where the U.S. does pull out of Afghanistan. I know you're talking about no artificial timelines, but when is that? When is enough enough? Is it 3 years? Is it 5 years?
Well, again, first of all, in Lisbon, the 2014 goals were set, and that's made a major difference. Look, there's two things I'd like to emphasize. The first is that everywhere we went here, and I mean everywhere, from the market that we walked on the street to the Afghan authorities, all the way up to the president, even in Pakistan, what we heard repeatedly was it is important that it is clearly understood that the U.S. is committed to seeing this through. Otherwise, there is a sense that that the Taliban and even Al-Qaeda is just waiting for us to leave so they can move back in. And people are afraid to deal with this. They're afraid to buy into a governing system. They're afraid to buy into the court system. They're afraid to take their disputes to governmental entities. They're afraid to vote. They're afraid to run for office. They're afraid to take jobs in the government or volunteer for the military because they think we're leaving in 6 months or 9 months or a year. And when we do, these bad guys are going to come back in and take over and punish them. And so they've got to know that we're committed, and we've got to show that we're committed. And we heard that from our people to their people consistently over and over again. Now, I think the goal is to leave behind a functioning Afghan state that they have built for themselves, and that is happening. And the progress is real, and it is steady. And I think we are on the timeline this year to have some real good news and make some significant progress. But I think if you attach a date to it that you talk about openly in the press especially, you are really creating a difficult situation because people just think, the bad guys, the Taliban and even Al-Qaeda elements know all they have to do is wait. They just have to wait it out. And that is very real. We heard that repeatedly today. We heard that repeatedly over the last few days.
All right, thank you very much. Senator, if you would like to maybe restate that in Spanish just so the Spanish outlets can have a little more audio in Spanish, please go ahead.
Una de las cosas que nosotros escuchamos en todos los sectores, en las personas que visitamos hoy, los ciudadanos del país de Afganistán, los militares de Afganistán, la policía, los oficiales gubernamentales del país de Afganistán, hasta el presidente de Afganistán y también nuestros líderes militares, es lo mismo, y es que es importante que la población de este país crea y entienda que los Estados Unidos no vamos a abandonarlos, porque el miedo que ellos tienen es que nosotros nos vamos a ir en 6 meses o un año y va a regresar el talibán, los talibanes van a regresar a Al-Qaeda y cuando ellos regresen los van a castigar. Las personas, si ellos se piensan que nosotros vamos a abandonar esta misión, tienen miedo a ir a votar, tienen miedo a ir a trabajar para el gobierno, tienen miedo a participar en el sistema judicial del país, tienen miedo a ser voluntarios en las Fuerzas Armadas o convertirse en policía, porque piensan que cuando los Estados Unidos se vayan, los talibanes van a regresar y los van a castigar a ellos y a sus familias. Así que para nosotros es importante estar muy claro que nosotros vamos a cumplir esa misión aquí. Y quiero reportarle que con mis propios ojos le puedo decir que se ha hecho progreso significante en los últimos meses. Queda mucho por hacer, una tarea difícil, con mucho sacrificio, pero hay progreso real y verdadero y creo que estamos caminando en los pasos correctos. Aquí se está logrando mucho y creo que en los próximos 6 meses van a haber buenas noticias aún más todavía.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for your time this morning. We know you have to run, and we want to thank everybody for taking time out of their morning on this Martin Luther King Day to join us on this call.